For centuries, the names of the author of famous plays such as Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth, etc., have been that of William Shakespeare. But perhaps these centuries we have been misled. Perhaps the famous writer's name was not William Shakespeare, but rather Edward de Vere. Hello, my name is Carly Walters, and this is my associate Bethany Swedhin. Today we will be debating the true identity of the world's most famous writer, William Shakespeare. The arguments we pose in opposition to Shakespeare being for the true author is as follows. First of all, Edward de Vere was an aristocrat, born and raised among the upper class. This would give him the necessary knowledge to write plays set in royal courts and amongst nobles. The necessary knowledge that a simple man from a small town would not have known or been able to gain. He traveled across Europe, giving him the knowledge of other countries such as Italy, that would be required to so eloquently depict them. This knowledge would not be accessible to a poor businessman from Stratford, as travel was rare and expensive at the time. The man from Stratford, whom is accredited with the authorship of these famous plays, spelled his name differently from the man who actually placed his name on these plays, causing belief that there are actually two different men. The man from Stratford spelled his name Shakespeare rather than Shakespeare. If the name William Shakespeare had been a pseudonym, it would have made sense, as Edward de Vere was nicknamed Spear Shaker. De Vere had this nickname at court for two reasons. His coat of arms featured a lion that brandished a spear, and for his exceptional abilities in tournaments. According to biography.com, de Vere graduated from Queen's College in Cambridge in 1558 and received degrees from both Cambridge and Oxford universities. As he was forced to go to law school, he wouldn't have been outright acknowledged for his reputation as an illustrious author. He was, however, known to have written, directed, and acted in many plays around the same time as the so-called Shakespeare. As the William Shakespeare from Stratford only attended grammar school for 7 years, he would not have been the educated or vocabulary that would create a poet, a playwright such as the one who wrote these famous plays and sonnets. His lack of education would account for the Stratford's man illiteracy. His father could neither read nor write. On her marriage certificate, his daughter, Judith, could not even manage spelling her own name. If William Shakespeare were literate, why would he not teach his own children? In his will, which contained 3 nearly illegible signatures, he did not leave his manuscripts to a hair. If you had created such excellent works, would you not want your children to have them, or at least the royalties for them? Our final argument pertains to Shakespeare's reputation. The man from Stratford was known as a businessman, not a poet or playwright. The author of the poems also performed them. This would have involved being away from Stratford for long periods of time, which would be bad for business. There is no actual record that Shakespeare from Stratford wrote the plays and sonnets. The only actual documentation is that Shakespeare co-owned the Globe Theatre in London and that he was part of the Lord Chamberlain's men acting troupe. Clearly, the man who wrote the plays and sonnets would have to be of someone of aristocratic birth who was well educated and well traveled. It only made sense that true William Shakespeare was Edward de Vere, writing under a pen name to escape ridicule from the upper class of England. Do you have any questions?
Oh, I do. Who didn't teach their children, William or his father?
William didn't teach his children.
Okay. How do you know that?
Because of our his wife couldn't even spell her own name, and his daughter.
Okay. Where did you get your first point from?
AbsoluteShakespeare.com.
Okay. I'm good.
My name's Soraya, and this is my partner, Nisa. Many books and articles have been written arguing that someone other than William Shakespeare wrote the plays and poems published under his name. There exist sincere and intelligent people who believe there is strong evidence that Edward de Vere was the author of these plays and poems. Yet professional Shakespeare scholars, those whose job it is to study, write, and teach about Shakespeare, generally find Oxfordian's claim to be groundless, often not even worth discussing. It is for that reason that my partner and I must uphold the calm side in this debate on the resolution that the plays do in fact belong to William Shakespeare and not to Edward de Vere. And we chose not to define any terms in this case. The three main arguments we believe force rejection of this resolution are: William Shakespeare was an actor in the company which performed the plays of William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare, the Globe Sharer, was also William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon, and the name William Shakespeare appears on everything. The first argument is that William Shakespeare was an actor in the company which performed the plays of William Shakespeare. From 1594, the plays of William Shakespeare were performed exclusively done by the acting company known as the Lord Chamberlain Mint, Lord Hudson Mint, and the King's Mint. William Shakespeare was, of course, a prominent member of this acting company, as the following evidence from web.cn.edu demonstrates. On March 15, 1595, the Treasurer of the Queen's Chamber paid William Kemp, William Shakespeare, and Richard Burbage, sergeants to the Lord Chamberlain, for performance at court in Greenwich on December 26th and 27th of the previous year. Also on March 13, 1602, John Manningham of the Middle Temple recorded in his diary a race anecdote about Richard Burbage and, of course, William Shakespeare. The last fact we have is that on May 19, 1603, the Lord Chamberlain's men were licensed as the King's Men. The document lists Lawrence Fletcher, William Shakespeare, Richard Burbage, and other members of the troupe. The Shakespeare prominence is indicated by the fact that he appears second on the list, only behind Lawrence Fletcher, who in your case don't know, he acted for King James of Scotland, who was the King's favorite actor. The second argument we had was that William Shakespeare, the Globe Sharer, was also William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon. We know this because a mortgage deed of trust dated October 7, 1601, written by Nicholas Wren to John Bodley, John Collett, and Matthew Brown, in which Bodley was given control of the Globe Playhouse. The Globe was described as being tenanted by Richard Burbage and, of course, William Shakespeare. So now we've established that William Shakespeare that performed the plays of William Shakespeare and was also a sharer in the theater in which the plays were presented. The final argument justifying rejection of this solution is the name William Shakespeare appears on everything. One example we found from Shakespeare Authorship.com was in 1593, the year narrative poem Venus and Adonis was published by Stratford native Richard Field with the dedication of the Earl of Southampton signed William Shakespeare. The dedication referred to the author's unpolished lines and contains typically fawning language of commoner addressing a nobleman for patronage. The following year, the Rape of Lucrece was published, also with the dedication to Southampton, signed yet again by William Shakespeare. Both poems went through many editions over the next half-century, all with the same dedication signed by, of course, William Shakespeare. The next evidence we found by the same website was in 1601, the volume Lesmeter by Robert Chaster contained short poems by several well-known theatrical poets. One of these poems, untitled in the volume best known as The Phoenix and the Turtle, is signed by William Shakespeare. The volume was printed by Richard Field, who had also printed Shakespeare's two narrative poems. In conclusion, Oxfordian claims that the name William Shakespeare was pseudonym used by Oxford and that there is nothing to tie the name to William Shakespeare of Stratford. But William Shakespeare actually has no characteristic of pseudonym. It was just a real name of a person closely connected with the production of plays. And there is no indication in the historical record that anybody ever suspected it of being a pseudonym or said that anybody other than Shakespeare was the author. All the historical evidence ties William Shakespeare of Stratford to the plays bearing his name and demonstrated and talked about in our case. Are there any questions?
So what were the names on that mortgage and trust again? This is under your second reference.
There's a lot. Nicholas Brent to John Bogley, John Collett, and Matthew Brown.
Okay. And how would you defend it that if William Shakespeare were a pen name, why would he sign his real name if he was dedicating his plays? Why would he not sign under a pen name?
He signed, what do you mean? I don't understand your question.
Um,
They were all signed
your
William
third case-
Shakespeare the same way that
yeah.
he signed his poems.
Exactly. So if you were writing under a pen name, of course you would put the pen name on it. So how can you prove that that wasn't just somebody writing under a pen name?
It said on the website that on webcn.edu that the people that were there was William Shakespeare. There was somebody else. Otherwise, if it was a pen name, there wouldn't have been the reason as to why he put it. Obviously, it was the same person because that's why he signed it his name and the same name on his poems. Because there was no reason to hide behind it.
So, my name is Bethany Swedhin, and I'm going to be defending our argument. So, clearly, De Vere is an immediate choice and an obvious choice, considering he was an aristocrat, and so he would know the royal courts, he would have the knowledge that someone of Shakespeare's standing, a poor businessman from Stratton-upon-Avon, would not have known. Shakespeare was not to have known to leave England, and Edward de Vere actually owned a villa in Venice, I believe, or in Italy somewhere. And at the time period, the only one who had similar writing structures to that of William Shakespeare was Edward de Vere's, which clues us in to believe that Edward de Vere was writing under the pen name of William Shakespeare. De Vere was also known to have written, directed, and acted in many plays. Some of the plays have events that parallel events in De Vere's life, such as the play Hamlet. As to the argument against his spelling, the way the man from Stratford spelled his name was Shakespeare, S-H-A-C-K, or S-H-A-K-S-P-E-R, rather than Shakespeare, and that suggests that they're not the same man. The man from Stratford had a father who could not read or write, so where would he learn how to become an author, such as he was? There are only 6 signatures. All of them are nearly illegible, and none of them are completely the same. And they all have the first syllable spelled S-H-A-K, not S-H-A-K-E. There are no personal records tying him to any of the plays or sonnets that were produced under the name of William Shakespeare. Do you have any questions?
Okay. If the signatures were illegible, then how sure are you that it said S-H-A-K and not S-H-A-K-E?
This is the information that we got from the website absoluteshakespeare.com. So I'm going off of somebody else's knowledge.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Thank you. That's it. Okay. My name is Vela. I'd just like to start off with adding to my partner's statement. Most would argue and say that Shakespeare wouldn't have knowledge to write his plays, but according to web.cn.edu, Shakespeare attended the Stratford Free School, where, let me remind you, the curriculum was heavy on Greek and Latin, 2 foreign languages. The textbooks that were used there covered much of the same material Shakespeare refers to. The timing the shrew even contains and reference to the standard Latin grammar textbooks used at the Stratford Free School. Also, according to Shakespeare online.com, there is a solid body of evidence showing that the real person named William Shakespeare wrote the poems and plays attributed to him. No Elizabethan document supports the claim that Shakespeare's plays and poems were written by someone else. And if we examine the lives of the other potential authors, they were not associated with any of Shakespeare's actors or productions of the plays. They didn't know the name was different. You guys didn't even know where you got your evidence from either. And it doesn't tell you guys also have more opinions than facts, which tells us that your case and evidence was not 100% correct. If the signatures were illegible, then how sure are you that they were not a lie? Because according to absoluteshakespeare.com, it never did state directly that they knew how the name was spelled. Any questions?
So, on your first one, you said that the Stratford School was heavy on learning Latin and Greek grammar. How do you know that he was advanced enough to actually learn that and not it be there when he was learning it, not later on?
Because there was evidence during the time period that he was in school.
Okay, but how do you know the curriculum wasn't taught later on in the curriculum and he didn't get it?
He did get it according to web.cn.edu before he did get that curriculum. And it grew heavier over time.
Okay, so what about the publication dates of his literature? That says that he was there. Like, how do do you have any dates proving that he was there learning? Okay. I think that's it. So, as a conclusion for the affirmative, with Edward de Vere being the true author, he nobody has proof that William Shakespeare actually did the writing. It's all illegible and everything. So, seeing that it's possible for Edward de Vere to be the true author, he could have used it as a pen name, and with his seal being with everything on it, it proves that Edward de Vere would be the true author.
In conclusion, I'd just like you to take a moment and think about the facts that we stated and think about what our opponent stated. We told you directly what we knew about him, and we stated the facts and where we got them, while my opponent said things that didn't really have any evidence to back it up or to even know where it came from. So if they don't know, what makes you so sure that they haven't lied about anything? Earlier it was brought up that Shakespeare was not the person that everyone thought he was, and the fact it was someone else. But William Shakespeare has no characteristics of a pseudonym. It was just the name of a person who was in fact closely connected with the production of the plays, as I said earlier. Finally, there is no indication in the historical record that anybody ever suspected it of being a pseudonym or said that anybody other than Shakespeare could have actually been the author. Therefore, all the historical evidence that we stated earlier in our case ties William Shakespeare of Stratford to the plays that bear his names. Which brings us back to point A, stating that this is the reason why my partner and I chose to hold up the concept of this debate that states William Shakespeare was in fact the true author and should be accredited for all his plays and poems.
For centuries, the name of the author on famous plays has been William Shakespeare. He's arguably the world's most famous author. But perhaps that name is wrong. Clearly, it's possible that the name William Shakespeare could be a pseudonym, a pen name. De Vere had the status of an aristocrat, which easily gives him the knowledge that is necessary for him to have written the plays that take place in royal courts. He was a well-educated man, graduating from Queen's College in Cambridge, and he had the education and the knowledge required for writing. Shakespeare's reputation in Stratford was as a businessman. It just doesn't make sense for a businessman to go to London for such long periods of time as to write and act in his plays and be away from his business at Stratford. So in conclusion, it's clear that the true author was Edward de Vere.
You listen to me. I come upon you people to open your eyes and see that William Shakespeare is the true author of the plays and sonnets. So giving the proper author credit, which we believe is William Shakespeare, for his outstanding plays and sonnets. There is no way it could have been Edward de Vere because there was no evidence provided that he was the real author. They were just two different writing styles. And just because he didn't travel the world doesn't mean that he did not have the knowledge to write these plays. So, with that being said, I think William Shakespeare wrote these plays. Thank you.